Prisons in the Wizarding World, Symptoms of Failing Democracy. For this presentation, be sure to have chocolate on hand. Few words about me. I'm Marjolaine Martin, just Marjolaine in the fandom, where I'm a podcaster for many years now. Some with La Gazette du Sorcier, the fan site on the Wizarding World, the French fan site on the Wizarding World, like the podcast Aspic, which is kind of the French equivalent of Potterhead, even if we stopped producing regular episodes lately. I was also a regular host of Speak Beastie, the Fantastic Beast podcast. I'm deeply honored to present for the first time at the Harry Potter Academic Conference after being a passionate spectator since the conference is accessible online. This presentation is partially inspired by an episode I did on Aspic last year with my friends and co-host Alex. About my Muggle life now. My academic background is in social sciences and anthropology, more specifically. And 3 years ago, I started working for the French Ministry of Justice at the research office of the Directorate of Prison Administration. Discovering from inside the prison system made me rethink how prisons are depicted in fiction. And as a Potterhead, Azkaban was a lot in my mind. To be clear, I'm not representing my administration in this speech, but I'm using the knowledge acquired from working with historians, law experts, sociologists, and also from experiencing myself through visits and a short observation internship in uniform, the day-to-day life of prisons in France. So what will I talk about? The state of prisons of a country is a symptom of the democratic health of its regime, usually one that most people don't want to think about. But we do think about it through fictions. Fictions are reflecting and affecting our representations. That's what we will explore today through the Wizarding World. Through Azkaban inspirations, we can indeed explore some Muggle history of prisons. I will present the basics on how to think about the prison's role in society today and how it translates in the Wizarding World. I'll quickly explain why, obviously, Dementors are horrible prison guards, but also why it makes sense the Ministry of Magic used them and what it says about the Ministry. The thread of these 20 minutes is to make you think for a moment of the sense of the prison sentence in both the Wizarding World and our Muggle world, and why we should all have these hard questions to our leaders. Disclaimer, obviously, I will talk from my French perspective. Our prison system is facing a grave crisis right now, with historical overcrowding and terrible conditions for the prisoners and the prison workers. But I'm aware presenting this to a mostly American audience, puts some things into perspective. Okay, I will talk a little bit about the US. Azkaban, a prison on an island, impossible to escape from. In the name itself, the author is referencing Alcatraz. This prison on a rock, a maximum security federal prison off the coast of San Francisco, California, closed in 1963. It was too expensive, of course. Of course, it's cheaper when you have Dementors who only require souls as payment. But putting a prison on an island is actually quite common in Europe too. I lived 9 years in Marseille, so I have to mention Le Château d'If, which you might know from the French novel Le Comte de Monte Cristo from Alexandre Dumas, and its movie adaptations. And speaking of Monte Cristo, some parallels can be made between Sirius Black and Edmond Dantes. They both are unjustly imprisoned at around 20 after being betrayed by a friend. They don't totally go mad thanks to knowing they are innocent and their will to revenge, and they escape after 12 or 14 years. And yeah, if for whatever reason somebody needs to cast a French Sirius Black, that's Pierre Ninet in the last Monte Cristo adaptation. You're welcome. But putting aside Le Château d'If, putting fiction aside, Le Château d'If was a military fort before being turned into a political prison. Likewise, the author gave Azkaban an origin story of being a private fortress created by the dark sorcerer Ecrisdis in the 15th century. It was turned into a prison by the Ministry of Magic in the 18th century. In France, the modern prison system was created in the early 19th century, and lots of ancient closed buildings were reused to become prisons. Old fortress, castle, abbey. Even Le Mont Saint-Michel was a prison from the 1780, from the Revolution until 1863. For Azkaban, like for the Château d'If or Le Mont Saint-Michel, it's the same logic. It's convenient to reuse this abandoned fortress on tiny islands. The buildings are already there, easy to transform, and being surrounded by the sea is the best way to prevent breakout. Now, I need to give you a very brief and rough history of the prison sentence. I just mentioned the prison system as we know it now was created in the 19th century. Prisons existed before that, but they were mostly for two purposes: keeping delinquents and criminals captive while awaiting punishment, or isolating political opponents. If we talk about the common law and not the political cases, the prison sentence is quite recent. Before that, when you were not sentenced to death, you could be sentenced to public shame and physical pain with the pillory, for example. The prison sentence replaced that with time out of society. The time spent in prison became the punishment itself. But still today, the idea remains, in the general opinion, that it's quite normal that physical and psychological pain must be part of the punishment of delinquents and criminals. And so prisons are associated with well-deserved pain. That's what we have in another part of the name Azkaban, the mixture of Alcatraz and Abaddon, a Hebrew word meaning place of destruction or depths of hell. I'm quoting the author's note on Pottermore, and I will use a lot this text on Pottermore in this presentation. But this underlying conception of the sentence as pain is not what prisons are supposed to be. The role of prisons in our society is to make society safer with two missions: guarding dangerous individuals away and putting back in society people who, when they're done with their sentence, will do better and not commit another offense or crime. And if you're thinking that the fear of prison, if it's a very horrible place, have a beneficial deterrent effect, well, maybe for some, but every observation and study I know are very skeptical on the efficiency of this dissuasive effect. For the prison to be effective in preventing dangerous individuals to escape and prepare the prisoners to reintegrate successfully the society, the prison guards have these noble tasks: security and education. They do have this mission of law enforcement faced with individuals who might be violent or defiant of authority, but they also have to respect the dignity of prisoners and have a part in the preparation of reintegration into society of better people. Of course, that's an ideal. In reality, it's very, very difficult work, confronted to damage people in a depressing environment. What about prison guards in fictions? It's a trope to represent them as cold and unsympathetic, at best, and often even cruel, and as violent as the prisoners. Dementors are an extreme version of this trope. They are not even human. In the origin story of Azkaban, we learned that they were created by the environment as a result of the horrors of Ecrisdis in his fortress. He used it to torture Muggles. They are a manifestation of the despair that infested this place. This idea makes me think of how the environment can affect the people who are working in it every day. But the Dementors are the ultimate vicious cycle. They feed on the despair that they themselves maintain. I don't need to explain you that it's out of the question to ask them to help prisoners be reintegrated into wizarding society. What role has Azkaban in the British wizarding society? The first objective of the ministry, when they decided to put a prison in Azkaban, is the same I mentioned earlier with all the examples of prisons on an island, putting prisoners in a place out of society, perfectly secluded and impossible to escape from. But it's very clear that sending people to Azkaban is a one-way trip. There is no other mission than preventing breakouts and no sign of any reintegration program. It evokes another vision of the prison system which was dominant at some point in our history and is still more or less explicitly defended by some people, considering delinquency and criminality as a defect that cannot be corrected, and the prison population as lost for society, like an incurable disease that the prison must contain to preserve the good people outside. It's an opportunistic and capitalist choice for the Ministry of Magic to use Azkaban as a prison. The Dementors present an opportunity of free labor and apparently capable of assuring the mission of keeping every prisoner unable to escape. It's an inhuman system, but easy to maintain, like it is. Nobody wants to think of Azkaban, and it's easy to not think about it because you don't have to look at it. It's out of sight. I heard my previous director of the prison administration presenting the prison system as the broom wagon of society. It has to deal with everything that the rest of our system failed to fix so we can continue to function. It's an ultimate failure of the society. It's an ultimate failure of a society to forget its prison population, to give up and let them waste away and eventually die. It's an inhuman system, and only safe until it breaks. Then the ministry and the rest of the population cannot ignore it. That's what we see in the series. So how to fix it? That's not an easy task because, well, it's never an easy task for politicians to defend a humanistic prison reform. It's rarely supported by the majority of the population who don't want to think of prisons and who are still in a mindset of well-deserved pain, I mentioned earlier. Repression versus healing looks like an easy binary way of thinking, but you are always testing the limits of a person's humanity when you ask them to extend it to people who have done objectively bad things and who are objectively dangerous. For the British wizarding world, the ministry got trapped by the original very bad decision to create this prison in Azkaban and to use the Dementors. It would have taken lots and lots of galleons to dismantle it, and more importantly, to get rid of the Dementors. So even a Minister of Magic who is ethically indignant by Azkaban would struggle to defend the investment required to fix this problem that nobody in the society thinks about. It's the Wizarding World and the Dementors siding with Voldemort who gave the most efficient leverage for the reform: fear. Kingsley Shacklebolt apparently managed to purge Azkaban from the Dementors and put horrors who regularly rotated as guards, which I'm not sure is a viable solution considering the guards, but I need another 20 minutes to expand on that. So even without Dementors in our Muggle prisons, don't look away of what's happening in it. Prisoners have human rights, and if you forget it, and if we forget it, we forget our humanity. Last week, I was at a historic event in Paris. Robert Badinter, the Minister of Justice who enacted the abolition of capital punishment in France in 1981, entered our National Pantheon Mausoleum of outstanding historical figures. He also decriminalized homosexuality and fought to humanize prisons. Azkaban represents everything he fought against, so I wanted to include him in this presentation. And even if he said to improve the prisons, you must act and never talk about it, we will talk a bit more. I still have a bit of time, but not enough to cover everything I want to talk about. So I'm letting you choose what you want to discuss with me. There's a little list of other topics I would have included with more time if you need inspiration. The impact of prison on prisoners' mental health, of course, is a very important topic, and we can discuss it with serious example. For example, the prison shock in Azkaban, which is the first day in prison and why they are the most sensitive period, and how we see that in the series. The absence of individualization of punishment in Azkaban, a very important topic. And I mentioned it, the solution of rotating horrors as prison guards may be a not so good idea if you want to discuss that. So yeah, eat some chocolate and I see you right now to discuss. Thank you.